The first of what we hope will become many lectures, hosted by the Quante S. Sapera chapter of the National Honor Society. Our guest speaker, I am proud to say, is one of our own. While one of our options was to have Mrs. Hurst present the complexities of the quadratic formula, we decided that would pose a problem, seeing that our auditorium can only hold 600 people. We decided it would be great for Ms. Barker to share her experiences with the mountain gorillas on her African adventure. Before 20 years of teaching science at Schroon Lake Central School, Ms. Cookie Barker earned her bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Pittsburgh, then completed her master's degree in zoology at Southern Illinois University before pursuing doctoral work and an educational degree from Colorado State University. In 1999, she was honored with the New York State Outstanding Biology Teacher Award. Along with presenting at regional, state, and national science teacher conventions, she has secured over $18,000 in grants for the Schroon Lake Central School Science Department. In 2005, Ms. Barker traveled to Churchill, Manitoba, on an Earthwatch expedition to study polar bears. In 2007, she traveled to the Peruvian Amazon to study biodiversity. Last summer, she traveled to Rwanda for gorilla trekking. Ms. Barker lives in Chestertown with her husband, Mike Prescott, an Adirondack historian and naturalist. They are the proud parents of Grail and Pepin, their Newfoundland dogs.
Okay, what I want to share with you tonight is the story of our trip to Rwanda last summer. And this was actually a birthday present for my sister, who turned 50 last summer. And so, this is our story. There we go, okay. Good to go. So anyways, Africa was something that we had planned on doing a long time ago. And you probably recognize this little girl here. That'd be me, and that'd be my sister. And so we've always talked about going to Africa on safari, and we just didn't exactly have the details worked out at that point. So as we got a little older, just a little mind you, we decided that gorillas would be a really cool thing to do. And so we were headed off to Kigali, which is the capital city of Rwanda. Before we could go, we had to do our own research. And we found this book invaluable by Bill Weber and Amy Vedder. And they actually have done the research on the gorillas themselves. And they truly are the two people that have started the ecotourism movement. And they are basically the people responsible for keeping the mountain gorillas alive today. So we also had to hop a plane to get there because it certainly was a long ways from home. And the little airport, it's hard to see, of Kigali is tiny, and the thing I remember most about it was we were not allowed to have any plastic bags. All plastic had to go in the garbage before we could get through the airport. So this was waking up the next morning, but let's just back up a little bit and figure out how we got there. So we flew from Montreal across the pond to the Netherlands, and almost missed our flight, but headed down to Rwanda. So it was 2 flights, and it seemed like, I want to say 16 to 18 hours. It was awfully long. And you couldn't see much on the plane except, of course, the little monitor that says your plane is right here. And you just kind of followed the monitor the whole time. So in Africa, the red area there is Rwanda. And the main city that we flew into is Kigali. And it's up here where the volcanoes are, and this is where the mountain gorillas are. They're right on the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. So I'm going to give you a little scenic tour of what it looks like to travel through from Kigali to there. This gentleman that's in this safari truck actually met us at the airport. His name was Moses, and he stayed with us the entire time. He didn't sleep with us, but he was close by. It was really important to us that we had some safety built into this expedition, because as you may know, Rwanda is not very stable. It's more stable now than it was a few years ago. But he was most generous and kind and took very good care of us. So he was with us the whole way. And this is kind of the view headed out of the city. And one of the things that struck me immediately were these high mountains. The other thing that surprised me the most was people were walking everywhere, even though they had vehicles in the background, but people were on their feet constantly. This was a type of a mall area, so their shopping centers looked something like this. There were a few cars that were traditional cars, but most people got around by walking or bicycles, motorcycles, even buses. But the colors, check them out. I mean, who would paint a building like that? They did. They liked it. Taxi. Here you go. And then as we got out of the city more, we were heading, this is what we saw most of the way. You can see the landscaping where they've done terracing so that they can farm the areas. And they farm all the way up to the top of these hills. And these are very steep hills. And you'll see they remind me of cow paths going down through the hills, and that's their foot trails, where they walk as they travel from location to location. A lot of irrigation is used for their area, and they have a lot of water stored up in that area near the foothills. And they just have a very sophisticated irrigation system. And you can see down in here some stonework that they have little gates and stuff built in, which they can shove the water one direction or another or control the flow. And I was quite impressed by the sophistication of that, and especially when I actually watched them doing some work on those irrigation ditches, and it was all with shovel. There was no heavy machinery around. And you can see a little settlement here. But as you'll see when we get further, all of these hillsides, there are little houses everywhere along. One of the things that intrigued me about this area was the clay, and how they used that clay then to make bricks. So they had some bricks stacked up, and what they actually did is they put a framework down. And then they mixed up the clay and water and just packed it in this framework, and then they made bricks. And then these obviously sold those bricks or used them in trade. Now the other thing that I wanted to show you here is these ridges. And this is part of the Rift Valley that we have there. In the geological formations, you have two plates that are kind of moving away from each other. And it's kind of like baking homemade bread. And you get that split in the middle of the bread, and it just kind of goes away. And you get all these ripples in the middle because you have a thin crust, and magma is popping up. So we had those ridges. But bicycles were also a big thing there. And I'm quite familiar with how bicycles can be used to carry things around. But I never really appreciated the extent to which bicycles could be used as trucks until I went to Rwanda. These are bags of potatoes. And he's got 3 of them, it looks like, on that thing. And that was a small load. These guys were incredible. They would pack everything on 2 wheels, and then they usually didn't pedal the bike, they got off and pushed it. And so it really was just a way for them to get their produce from one place to another. And it may not have been produce, it may have been lumber or something else that they were trying to move around. But that was their means of transportation. Now, you can make out these yellow canisters that the fellow has here. This is a spring. And people have water containers that they have to go to fill up at the spring, because there is no running water. There are no indoor plumbing or anything like that. It's all just a hut with a dirt floor, and that's it. So they're government issued, and each family gets so many of them, and they have to go get their water supply on a daily basis. And so they strap those things on their bikes, and they head to the water supply and fill those up. And so on our journey, we again saw lots of people walking, and I always got a big kick out of what they wore on their feet. Most of them were Crocs, but they weren't all matching always. So I think it was pretty much whatever they could find to cover their feet. Many of them were barefoot. And then I noticed there are all these rocks just scattered along the side of the road. I'm like, gee, that's weird. Wonder what they're doing with those. Well, they were building a sidewalk. Because this highway that was going through here actually had no place for people to walk, although it was their main route to get from point A to point B. So, as it turned out, as I was watching this, watching it as we're driving by 40 or 50 miles an hour, the guys would lay the stones down in there and do the rough work, and then the women would do all the fancy grout work in between the stones. And when they finished, they had some really, really nice sidewalks. And so they were doing this for miles and miles down the road, so I was able to figure that all out as we were driving by. And then the women always carried stuff on their heads, and it just amazes me how they could even balance it up there. Because they very seldom used their hands to support anything, and you might see as many as 5 baskets like this large, kind of arranged in some kind of bonnet system that's holding on their head, and there they would be. They would travel anywhere from 5 to 15 miles, just one direction, and then they turn around and go home for the day. So that was kind of like a regular route that they would make. And I had to take a picture of this because this is their log trucks. These logs were about 6 inches, maybe 4. Very small because there isn't much wood left there anymore. They've cut it all down. But that was a pretty prized possession right there on the back of a pickup truck. And then this is actually a view from the lodge we were staying at. It just gives you a really good perspective of the different terraces. They go all the way up the side of the hill there, and all the trees have been cut down. And then you can see the little scattered buildings in the valley area. There's actually a big volcano right behind that. This is kind of nice because it gives you a little better perspective on how much land there is associated with one family unit. So, for example, here would be a family unit, and right about there would be their property. And that's what they have to live on. So here's another one, and theirs was just right in here. So a very, very small piece of land that had to sustain that family. And so they did a lot of trading, a lot of trading. And I have to say, it was quite an eye-opener when we were driving by one of these places, and I was like impressed with all the dirt everywhere. People were going around barefoot and stuff, and clothes were just filthy. And then I saw a woman lying outside her hut, just lying on the ground. It was obvious that she was sleeping, and she was cuddled up like, she was still alive. But I just thought for a moment, I said, I wonder what she's doing. Why is she doing that? Why is she laying in the mud? And then it kind of dawned on me that probably it just felt better to be out in open air as opposed to being inside the hut. And she probably was sick, but it was just like, wow, she didn't even have a bed to lie in. And there are also a lot of big bodies of water, so that's why the irrigation isn't really an issue. I mean, they have the source of water, they just have to run it to where they need it. But this was a view from the lodge that we stayed in. And there's the volcanoes. There are about 5 different volcanoes, and there's always this haze on the top. And hence, when Diane Fossey, she did research in this area, of course, and when the book came out, Gorillas in the Mist, that's what they're talking about. These volcanoes are always in the mist, and that's where the gorillas are. They're hanging out in the rainforest, which is up at the top of those volcanoes. You can make it out right here. There's like a line going across that volcano. That's farmers' fields right up to the park boundary. Okay, you can switch out of that. Thank you. I want to go now to Google Earth and get you a better feel. Come on. There it is. There we go. Whoopsie. Okay, so we're going to go to Kigali, and then we're going to go to the volcano range where the gorillas are. So Kigali is a city, I can't remember exactly the number, but it's about, I want to say 8 million people. And when you zoom in on this stuff, you'll see what I'm talking about. Those are all like little houses and stuff. So there's a lot of people there in that area. And later on, if we have time, we'll come back to this area right here. This is the Genocide Memorial. So, as we back out of here and head over to this area. Okay. So here's the county border right here, country. Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda is here. And what we want to do is, I want to find this picture right here. I want to zoom in so we can see volcanoes. Okay. We're just going to drop you down to that. And a little bit of challenge from this perspective. All right, can you see volcanoes? Can you see that? That? Okay, let's see if we zoom in a little bit. See these farmers' fields right here? So they go right up to the edge. And there's forest, but that forest is only there because it's now a national park. So the people really had no reason to stop that forest cutting before, because they needed it to farm with. It wasn't until they realized that gorillas could bring money into their economy that they actually stopped the cutting up there and saved that area for the gorillas. So it was because Mzunga, by the way, means aimless wanderer, and they use that for all the foreign people that come to Rwanda. And so it wasn't until Mzungas came with all their money that they saw a value in protecting gorillas. So that's what's left now of Rwanda's rainforest. Okay, so I'm going to head back over here now. So this is what it looked like when we headed from our lodge to the park. And just to give you an idea of the secondary road here, people are walking down the edge, bicycles, motorcycles, people carrying stuff on their heads. I swear you're going to run over somebody. And they just totally ignore you. So that was a real eye-opener. So we basically went from Kigali to our lodge, which I didn't show you on Google, but it was kind of at the base of that mountain over here a little bit. And then we had 2 days that we went into the park to see the gorillas. So these next few pictures are actually going to the park, and that's what this is a shot of right here. You can kind of see the volcanoes in the background, kind of misting in. That's actually really there. It's not some fake thing. It's a mountain, volcano. And then in front here are all these fields. Very, very flat. It's very... It's just very scenic, actually. I'm kind of losing the resolution with this spotlight on, but anyways, when we get to the headquarters of the national park, so you have to buy a gorilla permit in order to go see the gorillas. And so everybody has to meet at this location at 8 o'clock in the morning. And everybody comes in with their little SUV here and their own little guide. And there are people that come from all over. And this little hut right here has a lot of coffee, tea, whatever you think you might need for the day's adventure out with the gorillas. And the way the system works is there will be a guide that's going to take you to the gorillas, and they will take 8 people maximum. So the next shot we see here, these are our, not guides, but like Moses. That's Moses right there. Those people show up driving the trucks, and they say, okay, we have 2 people, and somebody else say, I have 3 people, and so they'll say, well, you know, their ability is they can walk, but they can't hike very well, or, you know, they're really athletic, so they can probably go really far. And so these guys talk about what groups they ought to put all the people in. And then these guys, which is the scary ones, these were the guys. They were all dressed up like in their army fatigues. I was a little bit concerned at first. But they turned out to be very friendly. And these are the guys that can talk to the gorillas. They really do talk to the gorillas. But they had a piece of information that would show us, okay, you're going to go see the Hirwa group of gorillas today, and these are the gorillas that are in that family, or that troop. And so they would explain the whole thing. And we're like, oh, that'd be a great souvenir. You got any of those around? Oh no, that was the only one they had. So it wasn't like you could pick up brochures and bring brochures home. That was it. Those were their pictures, and that guy needed to use those every day. So that's the best we could do. So looking at a map, this is showing you the different groups of gorillas that have been habituated to humans. That doesn't mean that you can walk up to them and pet them. That means they'll just plain ignore you if you're in the neighborhood. And so one day we went to see the Hirwa group, which was here, and the second day we went over here to the Susi group. And then just to give you an idea of how many habituated gorillas, so if it's a round circle, they're familiar with people. If they're triangles, they're not familiar with people. So those are the gorilla groups that people don't go to. They use them for research purposes. And you can see the border of the countries there. So, in order to get to these gorillas, you have to go through a cow pasture. And there were really cows in the cow pasture. Kind of cute little cows. Didn't bother me a whole lot though, because, you know, I grew up on a farm. And it's not a cow, but I had plenty of cows around. And then you have little herders in the area. Right here's a garden, and they're grazing their cattle and the sheep right beside it. So their job is to keep them out of the little garden area. And then you just tie a rope around them and walk them around. I guess it's keeping them in control. And then we saw a few of these little pots. And now this is pretty good size, you know. This is way up like this, and it's just smoking away. We're like, what are they doing? Well, they're making charcoal. In the Amazon, they make charcoal, they burn a tree down. Well, they already got rid of all their trees. So they started using cow manure. And they're composting the cow manure, and they're burning it and making charcoal. So that would allow them to heat their homes and stuff. And then everybody gets into the fire building thing here, so I actually don't know if they're just playing around, if they were really serious about their job. But they took it very serious. So as we're on our way off to walking through this cow pasture, there were a lot of different scenes that we came across. But bags of potatoes, and mostly women and children in the area. I'm not exactly sure where the men were. There was one time when we were walking past a field and a woman had her hoe and she was up like this, you know, hoeing the soil, and the guy was sitting there on the log. And I'm not sure if it was just taking a break or if he was making sure she did it right. But I just found this to be a precious little guy, more curious about us, or maybe as curious about us as we were about him. And he was just right there in the middle of the field, standing there. Now, what you see here are what we call porters. And those are guys that you actually pay to carry your stuff. And even if you think you can carry your stuff, you're supposed to pay them so they can carry your stuff. It's like, okay. But fortunately, the travel agent that I had told me all that to begin with. So I had that all figured out. All my 10s and 20s and ready to go. But this was like a cow path that people used all the time to move down from down from the high mountains down into the valley. And that's pretty much what they look like. Eucalyptus trees in the background. And this was a guide who was taking us to the gorillas the second day. The thing that was interesting about him is he had his little cell phone going. And that surprised me more than anything, I think, was the cell phones. They use them. They call ahead to the guide, the spotters that are out looking for the gorillas, and he's like, and where are the gorillas at, and blah, blah, blah. And, okay, so now we gotta, instead of walk this direction, we gotta turn around and go that direction. And instead of a mile this way, it's 3 miles that way. And so they kept up with that, and that's how they knew where to take us to find the gorillas. So that was just kind of cool. They actually, those sticks, people use them, you know, as walking sticks through the park. And then it was an awfully long ways to get to the park boundary. And you can see the park boundary right here. And the forest starts immediately at the boundary. So, you know, Carmen's all exhausted here getting here because as a kid she drove tractors. She didn't drive or walk to one.